everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about what all of you are not currently doing but thinking about doing, which is your New Year's resolution and detox programs, weight loss programs, that kind of thing. And I'm going to be talking about what you absolutely must know before you begin any of these types of programs and what you need to dial in first. But before we get started, let me know, chime in, let me know where you're coming from in the world. So go. We're going to take just a few minutes to see who we're tuning into. Sandy's chiming in. I'm ready. Great book, by the way. Thanks, Sandy. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Let's see here. Who do we got chiming in the feed? Let's see if we're going to run this thing slow or if it's going to work for us. We got Marie from Canada. Let's try this. Okay, here we go. Sorry, my feed took a minute to load. We got Brenda from Michigan and Wendy from Georgia, Cindy from Pena. Where's Pena? Is that Pennsylvania? We got Peruz from Los Angeles, California, Sandy from Iowa, and Thea from Suriname. Where's Suriname? Is that India? Sherilyn chiming in. Sylvia from North Lawrence, New York. Misty from the scleroderma community. Cheryl from New Jersey, Sandy from Ontario, Anita from Vancouver. I think Canada is never stopping with us here. Jennifer from Crockett, Texas. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for chiming in tonight. So again, we got some Australians coming in. We got Panina from Melbourne. We got Sam from Detroit. We got Tiffany from Columbus, Ohio. Again, let me know where you're from. Your knowledge of where you're from fuels me, gets me excited, because our mission here at Gluten-Free Society and drpeterosborne.com is to reach 100 million chronically sick people. And when I can see our reach is happening all over the world on all the continents, then that makes me excited. That gets me fired up. Remember the rules. If you've got questions, go ahead and type them in now. I try to get to them first come, first serve. If you have a question we can't get to in the show, make sure you email me, glutenology@gmail.com. That's glutenology, Glutenology, glutenology@gmail.com. Look, we want to serve you. We want to take care of you. We want to help get the answers to your desired burning questions about health and the true gluten-free diet. So again, if we don't have time to get into the answer, email those questions over and I'll do my best to make sure we get them answered for you, or that we write or create a video answer or create a blog post for you as well. And we've got David Lincoln. He's U.S. We're in the U.S., David. We've got CW from New Jersey. We've got Lark from Toronto. Yvette from St. Pete Beach, Florida. We got Hina from Dallas. And we've got YouTube viewer Slew444 from Vancouver, Canada. More Canadians representing. Deborah from Pennsylvania. Debbie from San Diego. Bhakti from Hawaii. So lots of folks from all over the world. Again, thanks for chiming in with us tonight. We're going to be talking about what you need to know to do a detox program. So let's dive into it. So many of you are thinking about that New Year's resolution. And so a lot of you are either getting ready to do this, or you're getting ready to think about weight loss, right? These programs, if you will. And there are a lot of people, selling detox kits, detox programs, things to that degree. And, a lot of these things don't cover fundamentals of what you should absolutely be doing, as opposed to a program that's temporary, short-lived, to bring about a short-term exchange in the way that you feel or the way that you're behaving. We want to think more in terms of long-term. And when people get into these detox programs, a lot of times they're very aggressive. As a matter of fact, they're too aggressive, and you set yourself up for failure. So as you're thinking possibly about getting into one of these types of programs, we want to make sure that we're addressing some fundamentals. Now, fundamental number one, if you haven't done it already, the ultimate program for both, right? And if you don't have your copy, no grain, no pain. You can pick that up at Barnes & Noble. You can pick that up at Amazon or any other major book retailer. But No grain, no pain. If you follow that 30-day program, it's addressing a lot of the fundamentals. So let's talk about what some of those fundamentals are that a lot of detox programs are dealing in. A lot of programs deal in high doses of supplements without diet change. In essence, without lifestyle or diet change. Triangle is the symbol delta represents change. I'm just going to abbreviate that just so you know. So high dose supplement programs without change. Weight loss is restriction diet for short-term benefit with no long-term effect. In essence, the long-term effect is worn off as a result of the fact that nobody's going to be able to follow a mega restriction diet indefinitely without proper justification. So the biggest problems that we see with these types of protocols is, again, this type of therapy, and I've talked about this in the past, but high doses of supplementation, okay, supplements, liver detox, heavy metal detox, basically to help your liver, help your kidney function, those types of things. These are passive therapies. Passive meaning something else is doing the work, not you. And when it comes to detoxification, you can't rely on passive therapy, because passive therapy, if you don't actually do work to go along with that high-dose supplementation, and you don't set yourself up for long-term success. So what do I mean? If you're again, and this goes back to what are you trying to detox? A lot of people are trying to detox from poisons in the environment, whether it's pollutants, whether they're trying to do a liver detox, whether they're trying to do a foot bath detox or a kidney detox or a GI tract detox. What are we detoxing from? That's number one thing. So why are we doing a detox, and what are we detoxing from? We're usually, if we answer the question honestly, and you should always answer these types of questions honestly, you're detoxing from yourself. And what do I mean by that? Your behaviors, yourself. You're detoxing from what you've been doing to put yourself in that situation. So if you think about, why do we need a GI? If you eat well and you eat healthy, why do you need to detox your gut? If you take good care of your liver, right, by eating healthy and having good exercise and good behaviors, why do you need to do a detox? So a lot of the whole premise of doing a detox is that you're detoxing from yourself and your own behaviors. And so using a bunch of supplements as passive therapies is not going to fix this. Remember, it's not going to fix that. And if that's what you're relying on, again, the long-term duration of success is going to be minimalized. And that's what you have to go back to and think about core fundamentals. Core fundamentals, no grain, no pain, is one of those core fundamentals. We wrote that book to last decades with the research that's in it and the advice and the tips that are in it. It's based on hard science, and it's based on, well, to date, almost 20 years of clinical experience. So, again, you can't detox yourself from yourself unless you change yourself or change your behaviors. So what changes in behavior, what do you need to learn to recognize? And the first is the input. So what are you doing that's creating the need for the detoxification? A lot of people look at detox, let's use a different color here. A lot of people look at detox and they use this bucket analogy. So, if you think about toxins, I'm not a great artist, so forgive my great or lack of great artistry. But if this is the bucket, right, the toxic load, then everything that comes in the bucket, serves to fill it up. Now, it's really more like a funnel, and maybe a bucket analogy isn't the greatest analogy. And when I say a funnel, meaning we always have toxins coming into our life, even if we live a pristine, clean diet, clean food, good exercise, good sleep, good behavioral habits, good friends, no psychological nightmares around us, right? We have still toxic things coming in. And we should have some type of way to get them out, right? And so this is why I say it's less like a bucket, more like a funnel. When a funnel backs up, it overspills. We want to have nice funnel direction coming out of this. What are these arrows representing? So if we really think about what are the funnels that pull the toxins out, one of the big funnels is our liver. And so we can say, okay, the liver is important in detoxification. One of them is the kidney. We can also say that our skin does detoxification. But that's not all. We've got more even than just those. We've got our breath, breathing. We get rid of toxins through the lungs. We also have our bowels, right? Our poop, if you will. So bowels help us to detoxify. Those are probably some of the main areas where we do the vast majority of our detoxification. So where people run into trouble is if these systems are slowed down. And that's a lot of times if you buy these detox kits that support you with supplements, these are designed to support these basic functions: breathing, lung function, liver function, kidney function, skin integrity and function, and bowel integrity and function. So, for example, a lot of people use milk thistle, right, for liver detoxification. A lot of people will use aloe vera for coating the bowels, or zinc carnosine for helping heal the bowels, or they'll use high doses of vitamin C to flush the bowel out, right, and that can help to minimize the toxic load. Again, just doing this without changing the input, and that's what we want. What is the input, right? The input that we predominantly see are people's diets. We see environmental pollutants, and that could be air, water, etc. We see, let me get this out of the way. We see sometimes people's input for toxins is psychological, right? Meaning they're in bad relationships, they hate their job, they hate their boss, or they hang out with people who are what we call negative Nellies or bring them down, right? They have basically psychological pollution. For some people, the pollutants, aside from air and water, there's things like EMF that can come in to the equation. There are things like heavy metals in our environment that we're exposed to, pesticides, which, I would say largely people get exposure through pesticides through their diet, or if you live in an area where pesticide sprayers are being used aggressively near a farming community, for example. So it's identifying the input. If we identify the input first, then we come back over here and we say, okay, we're going to change our behaviors to minimize the input. That's the step one. This is the critical step one, not to take a bunch of stuff to do this. Because a lot of times what happens when people are overwhelmed here and they start a process here, what they actually do is end up feeling worse, much, much worse, as a result of just taking a bunch of pills without changing their behavior. Because the pills are not designed to work by themselves, they're designed to work in conjunction with real meaningful change. So, again, our major excretion routes: breathing, liver function, kidneys filtrating, our urine, the skin, and the bowels. So let's talk about, aside from minimizing the input, again, so changing your diet, no grain, no pain, filtering your air, filtering your water, minimizing any exposure that you might get to environmental chemicals or chemicals in the food, or the fruit, if you will, the frankenfood. Evaluating your relationships. It surprises me how many people come to me in my practice, and a big part of their problem is in a relationship that they have. They have a psychological toxin that they're trying to cope or deal with. And so this is very, very important. We'll see people with EMF issues that are crashing because they're overexposed, because there's just too much going on altogether in this overburdened toxicity. So again, we can alter this. We can identify problems here. One of the things I like to use, at least in my office, is we like to analyze the diet. What is a person allergic to? What is a person eating that they shouldn't be eating, even if it's a healthy food? What is a person exposing themselves to? What are their dietary patterns and habits? Are they sleeping properly? Because that's another thing. Lack of sleep would be considered a toxic load, right? Because we need sleep to heal. Lack of exercise, would be considered toxic for a number of different reasons. So if we look at other things, I should say lack of, right? Lack of exercise. If we look at other things or lack of sleep, again, this builds the burden here, and we want to have those behaviors really, really dialed in. I've talked about the 7 effective habits of a gluten-free warrior, and those of you who haven't seen that video, you can go check that out. You can go over to Gluten Free Society and sign up for our newsletter. It's one of the first things I'll send you is a video called The 7 Highly Effective Habits of the Gluten-Free Warrior. But in summary, what are those habits? It's eating right, it's exercising, it's getting sunshine, it's getting adequate sleep, it's getting stress management or stress control, and it's drinking clean water and breathing clean air. Those are the 7 things that you really have to dial in from a behavioral perspective. And sometimes it's different for different people. I hear sometimes people say, oh, I'm a night person. I was always this way. Yet they're still sick. They're still struggling because of a belief process, because of a false belief process. I get some people who live in an area. I had one time, I had a farmer, he was a grain farmer, and he was highly allergic to, he was highly gluten sensitive, and he was around it all day long, and that's what he did for a living. But more specifically, he was around the glyphosate quite a bit, and it was making him sick. We have people that are allergic to everything under the sun, anything from blueberries to broccoli to cauliflower to beef to gluten, etc. You know, exercise is one of the missing elements for many people in terms of how much to do, or if they're even doing it at all. So again, if you don't have these diet and lifestyle patterns dialed in, then your toxic burden becomes 10 times greater, because you're putting all the pressure on these internal systems that are designed to get things out of you that don't belong in you. And so we look at breathing, for example. What can we do to improve breathing, or to improve the toxic release from our breathing? Is we can actually breathe. How many of you sit, and let's maybe ask this question, how many of you work in an environment where you're sitting 7+ hours a day at a computer desk? If you are sitting at a computer desk, just type computer in to your feed. Let's get a feel for how many of you are actually doing that on a consistent or regular basis. I want to just like to see what kind of audience we're dealing with tonight. So again, just type computer in to your, oh, here we go. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so it looks like a ton of you are typing that in, which is pretty typical, right? Computer, sitting in a car, driving, if you're commuting to work. Some people commute an hour to, commute an hour back. And so there can be a major issue with chronic sitting. Well, what happens with chronic sitting is, for most people at a computer desk, is the posture, which should be here, goes here, because you're in front. Right? And so that poor posture like that, it closes off the airway, it closes down the lung. There's some studies that show that you get 20% less oxygen when you're sitting at a desk all day, and that lack of oxygen means less energy production by your body, by your muscles, by your tissue. It slows down your metabolism, right? So it can affect not only the oxygen that you breathe in, but it can affect the toxins that you breathe out. Now, one of the other habits that a lot of people have in this kind of go and blow environment in today's society is they're eating on the run. Instead of sitting down, instead of relaxing, instead of breathing and being in a relaxed state when they're eating, they're doing so on the go. And so again, one of the best times, what I like to see people do is before they eat a meal, is to do deep breathing exercises. Deep breathing exercises are important before a meal. Why? Because it slows down your sympathetic nervous system and it turns on your digestion. Look at how many people take over-the-counter antacids and other medications for heartburn relief, etc. Why? Because they're eating so fast and they're always in go, go, go mode that their guts are not working, because they're not being turned on by the nervous system. So sitting down, taking a few minutes to relax, do some internal deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, basically fill your belly, not your lung. So we fill the belly and breathe in, and a kind of a general rule of thumb, and it's different for different people, but a general rule of thumb is take about 3 to 5 seconds, slow breathe in, hold it for about 5 seconds, then slow breathe out for about 5 seconds. And that pattern will calm down your your sympathetic nervous system. It will activate your parasympathetic nervous system. It will help you detoxify through your breathing, and it will help turn on your gut, which is important because we need the bowels to function. Because if you're constipated or backed up because you're in hyper-go mode all the time, then one of your major routes of excretion of toxins is also going to be backed up. Remember, one of the causes of leaky gut is chronic constipation, because all that stuff just gets stuck in you. And some of that stuff that you eat has got poison in it. Remember that even if it's healthy, even if it's all organic, your body has to distill out good from potentially bad. And so for every plant or for every meat product or whatever it is that you're eating, there's going to be some things that are considered by your body to be waste products that it wants to expel. Well, if you're constipated, that waste gets stuck inside your gut, and now it gets access to your gut cells for longer periods of time, and it can do damage, creating intestinal permeability. So we want those bowels functioning. Kind of a good rule of thumb is 1 bowel movement a day. Some people have 2 bowel movements a day, and that's okay as well. You start getting over 2 bowel movements a day, you start getting into potential problems where maybe you're eating something that's creating irritation. But 1 to 2 good solid bowel movements a day, not loosely formed, not diarrhea. We're talking about brown in color, well-formed, well-shaped, where no blood, right? That's effective. And remember, part of how you get rid of toxins is through your bowels. Your bile which is something your liver produces, your gallbladder excretes to help you digest fat. Bile also binds toxins and helps you push them out. So your bowel function is very, very important. Your skin function, and we're going to tie in these two. So lack of exercise, okay, puts pressure on the skin, and one of the reasons why. One of the functions of exercise, aside from the movement and the stimulation of hormones and growth hormones and healing, and the flow of lymphatic fluid and the better flow of oxygen and blood through the physical body itself, one of the functions of exercise is sweating. And sweating is one of the excretion routes of toxins and chemicals in our body. And if you're not sweating on a regular basis, if you're not getting in a good sweat on a daily basis through movement and activity and exercise, you're minimizing your skin's ability to help you detoxify. And where a lot of people fall into a problem is they already have a liver issue. They've overwhelmed their liver with drugs, with prescription medications. They've overwhelmed their liver with aggressive caffeine use. They've overwhelmed their liver with alcohol on the weekends, binge drinking, that kind of thing. Or they've overloaded their liver with toxins and pesticides in the food that they're eating. So you get, basically, you get an overwhelmed liver. What starts to happen when the liver's overwhelmed is the skin starts to help the liver. The skin is the largest detoxification organ in the body, and it's, we could say, maybe the second most important in regards to when the liver's backed up, the skin will do some of the job. And that's why a lot of people with liver issues will start to develop mysterious skin rashes. They'll start breaking out in hives. They'll start to develop things like eczema as a result, again, of not properly detoxifying. Again, the toxic load starts to come out in the skin. So the skin is just pushing the stuff out because there's no other excretion route that's effectively working. So keeping a daily sweat, and I like a high intensity interval exercise, 10 to 20 minutes a day to work up a really nice sweat. Once a day is a very, very effective way to keep your skin doing what it's supposed to do. Then, of course, we've got liver function itself. I mentioned a number of different things. I mentioned medicines. I mentioned drugs. I mentioned caffeine. I mentioned that a lot of people do overconsume alcohol, or a lot of people get exposure to lots of pesticides. All that's got to be processed by your liver. A lot of these toxins are fat soluble, and they have to be converted into water soluble toxins so that your body can get rid of them through the sweat, or your body can get rid of them through the urine. And so the liver's job is largely playing that role. So if your liver's not healthy, you're going to get a bunch of fat toxins, and this goes back to what I'm talking about with weight loss. So if the liver is overburdened, we're going to block weight loss because we're storing the toxins as fat because there's nowhere else to put them because these other systems are broken. So liver not functioning well can wreck a weight loss program, and I've seen a lot of people end up with visceral adiposity or visceral problems as a result, visceral fat gain, right, which is fat around your organs, your heart, your intestine, etc., as a result of the liver not properly functioning. So again, the liver, very, very important. You can take supplements to support liver function, but again, if you don't change the active, remember I said this is passive? Well, this is active, and you have to get active, and not even just physically, but you have to get active with your choices to be successful at any type of program at all. And then we have the kidney, and the kidneys need to be functioning well. And a lot of people, I've seen this very commonly with gluten sensitivity. Gluten can I've seen it trigger IgA nephropathy. So any of you out there that have ever struggled or been diagnosed with IgA nephropathy and you haven't gone gluten-free or grain-free yet, you might just talk with your doctor about running some testing for gluten sensitivity, because there's a very strong link between kidney damage and gluten sensitivity or gluten exposure. But again, if you're eating things that can damage your kidney, that's a common thing. A lot of people suffer with recurring kidney infection or chronic urinary tract infections. Again, kidneys are being overworked, they're being overwhelmed. So kidney function's got to be a priority as well. One of the best things you can do for healthy kidneys, aside from eating well, is making sure you're not underhydrated. Remember that your body is supposed to be about 65 to 70% water, and when you're underhydrated, what can end up happening is those toxins, they don't have a flow. They don't have a fluidic flow out of the body. You're dehydrated. Everything is more sluggish and it doesn't move as quickly. So you can recirculate toxins when you're dehydrated. So make sure, as a general rule of thumb, I like to say if a person is really struggling in these areas, you want to work up to where you're peeing 4 to 6 times a day. If you're not peeing 4 to 6 times a day on a regular basis, then you're probably not getting adequately hydrated. Now, there are some other blood tests and lab tests that can be done that can measure electrolyte levels and show you. But generally, by the time those particular lab tests are abnormal, the dehydration is pretty darn severe. So you've got to make sure, you know, if you're measuring it through your kidney function itself, you know, 4 to 6 urinations a day is going to be good flow out of you. So you're pulling things out of you consistently. There are also some tests that can measure your kidney and liver function as well. If we're talking about liver function, you know, there's some simple tests that your doctor can order for you that will kind of give you a level of whether or not your liver has good function. One of them is called ALT, one of them is called AST, another one of them is called bilirubin. Again, simple blood tests on a general physical examination and chemistry lab examination that can be done that can give you at least somewhat of a biochemical window into whether or not the organ is functioning. And then for your kidney, you can have your doctor measure creatinine. You can also have them measure something called BUN, that stands for blood urea nitrogen. There's also another marker called GFR, glomerular filtration rate. Those are all good tests to kind of give you a general idea of whether or not those two detoxification organs, very, very critical that they're working appropriately to get you to where you want to be. Again, if these are backed up and these are not addressed, then you get a toxic overload. And when you get a toxic overload, what happens when we get a toxic overload? Illness. Toxic overload is nothing more, if we really just want to cross the board, say it as simply as possible, a toxic overload is really nothing more than your body's loss of the ability to adapt to the garbage that is being pumped into it. In other words, it can no longer adapt, it can't excrete the stuff, it's burdening it to such a great degree that it starts to internalize and it starts to disrupt hormones, it starts to disrupt organ function, and the body starts to slowly break down. This is what we call chronic illness. So, if you're diagnosed with a chronic illness, if you've been to the doctor and they've told you, hey, you've got X, Y, or Z chronic illness, right? And you haven't had this conversation with that doctor, it's the first conversation you should ask to have. What do I need to do here in order to improve the outcome of my situation? And if they tell you that this is not important, that's your cue to find a new doctor. Like that should be your litmus test for either hiring or firing a doctor. Okay, let's see here. So yeah, here's a comment coming in. I've recently been diagnosed with slight fatty liver, so following no grain, no pain is helping to lose the weight to prevent cirrhosis of the liver. Yeah, I mean, look, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is very, very common for people with gluten sensitivity. It's actually one of the most common manifestations that I see in my practice when people are gluten sensitive is they'll have elevation in their liver enzymes, or they'll have had an ultrasound with their internal medicine doc and they'll have been given the diagnosis of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I've even had some people come to see me who've been accused of being alcoholics, meaning their doctor didn't believe they didn't drink, but that what was damaging their liver was actually gluten. Let's see here. So again, as you've got questions, go ahead and start punching those questions in. I'm going to start rolling into answering some of those now. My feed's just taking a little bit of time here to get going here. Okay, here we go. Bringing it back online now. Let's talk, okay, we got, well, man, the questions are just coming in now, okay. What do you suggest to help with the constipation other than magnesium? Sandy's asking that question. So, you know, again, if we're talking about bowel function, you're trying to improve your bowels, one of the best things is, you know, if we're talking about, first of all, diet. First thing I'd recommend is look at your diet. Now, from a fiber perspective, about 25 plus grams a day is a good quantity to make sure that you're able to move your bowels, that your bowels are good. But hydration, lots of water, because a lot of people are constipated as a result of not enough water, not enough fiber. Now, if you are already there on both accounts, you've got water, you've got fiber, you might look at your psychological status, because if you're chronic go, 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 it's going to shut your bowel function down, and that includes constipation. So deep breathing, I mentioned earlier, one of the other solutions that a lot of people who have really, really high stress lifestyles tend to find very helpful is something called sensory deprivation. Sensory deprivation, aka float tanks. A float tank is basically, it's 1,000 pounds of magnesium poured in a tub of water, and you get inside of it and you float. You're wearing blinders so you can't see, you're wearing earplugs so you can't hear, you're in the dark, you're floating, so there's very little gravitational force on your spine and on your body. So we're depriving you basically of the senses, right? We're taking out sight, vision, etc., and or hearing, etc., and we're taking away a lot of the stress. A lot of what can come in is stress, right? So stress comes into that bucket. Well, when we take away sense, we get your body's immune system and your nervous system, particularly your parasympathetic nervous system, to finally be able to turn on. And so for some people, this is like, if you've ever tried meditation and failed miserably, and a lot of people do, they just can't get relaxed, they're too amped up. This is like meditation with training wheels. And it really helps you get into a meditative state to calm the nervous system and calm the body down. So something I can highly recommend for those of you who are really amped up or live a very high stress lifestyle. As you're trying to transition your behaviors away from a high stress lifestyle, this can be used passively as an adjuvant. It's basically a very, very, you get in these tanks for about an hour long, and the effects can last for up to a week, but it can be very, very calming and very, very relaxing. Some other strategies that work for constipation. Some things that I like to go to initially, aside from, again, looking at what you might be allergic to in your diet, looking to see whether or not you have yeast overgrowth or some other type of microbiome abnormality. Probiotics can be a very effective and very helpful supplement to get the bowels starting to be regular again, as can vitamin C. Higher doses of vitamin C, getting up to about 5 grams of vitamin C, not your weak little 200 milligram capsules that you buy over the counter that are probably corn-derived vitamin C. I'm talking about really strong, potent vitamin C, up to 5 grams a day. Can help pull water in your bowels and get your bowels moving if you're really backed up. Although I don't recommend that you do those things without making the lifestyle changes and behaviors again, because even supplemental recommendations that I have are still passive if you're not making active changes in your diet or lifestyle. I like this. So Daniel says, still cannot figure out why my muscles get extremely stiff. I mean, there are a number of reasons why, the muscles get stiff. We're talking about the exercise. That's why I like to come back to this core fundamental element here, because muscles can be stiff for a lot of different reasons. For example, magnesium deficiency can cause muscle stiffness. B vitamin deficiency, too much sugar. Caffeine use. If you're dependent on caffeine for energy, caffeine use can cause muscle stiffness. Sleeping on a mattress that's full of pressure points can cause muscle stiffness and poor sleep. Poor sleep can cause muscle stiffness. Lots of stress can cause muscle stiffness. The wrong chair and the wrong height of your monitor at work can cause muscle stiffness. So, there are a lot of different things. One of the best things to do after you've analyzed your behavior and you start making changes, but you're still struggling, is to get involved with a couple different things. Number one, I would recommend a very, very good massage therapist that's trained in something called myofascial release, MR, myofascial release. Sometimes muscles can be super tight as a result of years of adhesions that have built up, and so myofascial release sometimes is what's necessary, a physical force to get into the muscle to really loosen it up, so that we can get it going again. So myofascial release is one thing that might be extremely helpful. If we're talking about muscles that are stiff, not so much joints, but muscles. One of the other things that can be done that I really love is just, instead of doing high intensity interval training, is to do some type of formal stretching routine. So stretching routines can be very effective for really loosening, and it's got to be done consistently. You can't stretch for a day and say, man, my muscles are still stiff. You've got to really do it consistently. 20-minute stretching sessions in the morning or in the evening. Do that for a good solid month. Combine that with some myofascial release. Consider a float tank for the relaxation of the magnesium, and also consider supplemental magnesium. Magnesium is a natural muscle relaxer. And also consider having your doctor test you. One of the great things here with the intervention of how do we change our behaviors And how do we choose the right supplements? Because that's another issue altogether. A lot of people just take generic things and they never really think about, well, why am I taking this? Why is this unique for me and my own unique needs, my own unique biochemistry? And it may not be. The generic detox kits may not be what you need. I never do generic detox when people come to see me in my office, because we're trying to decide exactly what it is they need. And the way we do that is through testing. So one of the things that you can do is get your doctor to test for nutritional deficiencies. Magnesium deficiency, can cause muscle spasm. And if you have that and you're not correcting that, or you're not eating foods that are high enough or rich enough in magnesium, or your behaviors are magnesium depleting, then you can end up with a really, really tight muscle regardless of all those things. So, when at a loss, when you hit a point where you're like, I think I'm doing all the right things, following no grain, no pain, doing all the right things. When you hit that point where you're plateaued, now it's time to seek out professional help. You could call somebody like myself, or you could call somebody who's trained in functional medicine to get a deeper answer for what's going on. So Cheryl says, going in a tank would cause me stress and anxiety. Don't knock it till you've tried it. I'm kind of claustrophobic myself, Cheryl. Float tanks are huge. It's not like this tiny coffin that you're being confined to. It's a very, very big tank. You're very comfortable. You can actually spread your arms and legs out. And the ceiling on it is dome shaped. So you've got, you could put your arm out in front of you and it's not going to hit the ceiling. So if you haven't tried a float tank and you're worried about claustrophobia possibly, maybe even a little bit like me, realize that those tanks are really, really big. And so go give it a try. Even if you have that, at least try to get in and see. If it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. Maria says, hi doc, what kind of probiotics do you recommend to improve bowel movements? Thank you. A couple different versions. Got to be careful with probiotics because of the grain contamination. So I recommend either Biotic Defense, which is a high strength based probiotic, or I recommend something called Ultrabiotic Defense, which has just got a much bigger kick. Whereas Biotic Defense is about 42 billion, Ultrabiotic Defense is hundreds of billions of colony-forming units of predominant bacterial species that help the gut and help the flow of the gut. So either one of those things would be effective. Love this. Thank you. Wendy says, thank you for going live to help others. Bless you. Thank you, Wendy. That makes my night. It really does. I love to feel appreciated. And again, the way you guys can make me feel appreciated, aside from just tuning in and allowing me to give you the knowledge that I've been blessed to have, is to share it with someone else. So if you know somebody who can benefit from this information, remember what our mission is at Gluten Free Society. It's to help 100 million people who have no idea how important changing your own self and your own behaviors actually how important that is, and how liberating that is, and how that could free up and that could save so many lives if people would just put more trust in their own behaviors and themselves, and less trust in doctors who want to give them chemicals that are artificial to suppress the symptoms, right, of their bad behaviors. So again, the way you can help me is by sharing this information with as many people that you feel like could benefit from it. Lisa says, what detox routine do you use for detox from chemo? So Lisa, clarify that, because I think we could do a whole show on that. Honestly, that's a big question. Is this post chemo or is this during chemo? What is it? Are you done? There's no more chemo that's going to happen. If I had better clarity, I could give you a better answer. But I think that might even be more specifically an entire show in and of itself. Matter of fact, Lisa, why don't you do me a favor? Email glutenology@gmail with that topic, question, and idea, and I'll do my best to get that answer for you relatively quickly. So some of you asking me about other people's products. I don't comment on other people's products. Look, there are a lot of products that are out there on the market. I don't want to say something bad about somebody else's product. Don't ask me about other people's products. If you want to ask about certain things that I manufacture, that we carry at Gluten Free Society, I'm happy to answer those questions. But I don't want to get into the negativity because, again, the bottom line with a lot of products is that they have rice derivatives, corn derivatives. They're not truly grain-free. They wouldn't meet the standard. And I see this all the time. So plus I don't have time to review every single company that's out there and to be able to intelligently speak about all their different ingredients, etc. Oh yeah, thanks Daniel. Daniel says can't going to make your bread tonight. Can't wait. So those of you who don't know, we've just come out with an awesome pre-done for you kind of bread mix that you can make, and it's not just for bread, by the way. It's called Warrior Bread, and we'll put a link in the feed for you if you want to learn more about Warrior Bread. But it's very very simple ingredients. But we've been working on this for the last half a year or so in our test kitchen, and we've created Warrior Bread stuffing, and we've created Warrior Bread rolls that you can make. We've created a number of different options of things that you might miss in that bread category. They're actually completely grain-free. There's no corn, there's no rice, there's no fillers. Yeah, very simple ingredients. So we've actually created a cookbook online. It's a living cookbook. So we add to it from our test kitchen, but we also encourage people that are using and buying the Warrior Bread to experiment with it, and if you create some of your own concoctions, we've got another URL that you can go and post your recipes. And as a matter of fact, those of you who post awesome recipes, we're going to pick a winner. We have a contest coming up for the new year, and the winner is going to be very pleasantly surprised. We've got a bunch of wonderful, great prizes coming your way. So stay tuned. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for the contest information and details. But I'll post a link up to that recipe page. If any of you want to start contributing now, those contributions even now will be entered into our contest. Okay, so Leanne is asking about, or Lisa Ann is asking about post-chemo. So I'm going to answer that very briefly, but if you email us, we may be able to dive into that a lot more aggressively. So post-chemo, some of the biggest factors post-chemo are vitamin B12 and folate. A lot of your chemotherapeutic agents will hinder the B12 or overutilize the B12 and the folate, and that can cause gut dysfunction, leaky gut, and other problems. So higher doses of vitamin B12 for many people can be quite helpful, especially if you've got chemo brain, as they like to call it. The chemo brain, the B12 and the folate help with the thought process. And you need B12 to make. There's a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, and it's very hard to make acetylcholine without. Okay, looks like we're back. Maybe we had a tech glitch. Sorry, folks. So I was talking about vitamin B12. Post chemo, a lot of people with chemo brain, vitamin B12 is one of the things that can be very helpful. So higher doses, you wouldn't want to go small multivitamin with some B12 in it, but higher doses, 2,000 to 5,000 micrograms a day can be ineffective. But one of the best things that you can do, honestly, for post chemo is go to your doctor and ask him to run a lymphocyte proliferation test and measure for vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Getting that done tells you exactly what you need to help better recover. But generically speaking, lots of folate, lots of B12, L-glutamine can also be very helpful for post-chemo recovery as well. So attempting those things, and then again, we can get into greater detail. Like I said, that's too big of a question to just throw it a minute at it. Let's see here. So Carolina says, do I recommend light therapy for muscle recovery and collagen? Depends on what kind of light you're talking about, Carolina. Just maybe specify the type of light that you're referring to, because there's lots of different types of light therapies. There's infrared lights, there's laser lights, there's UV lights. So just depending on what you're referring to. Laser light works really well for muscle pain recovery and inflammation in the muscles, joints. So if you're talking about low-level laser, can work really well. to stimulate those growths of muscle. Wendy says, shared to lots of people, can I treat long distance? So let me just clarify one thing. I don't do any treating. You know, I don't believe that treatment is where it's at. I believe that asking what a person's unique biochemistry and empowering them with knowledge to make behavioral changes, that's not treatment. Treatment is artificially suppressing symptoms using chemicals. So I just want to clarify that I don't treat. I help the body, and I help a person identify where the body is not getting what it needs, or when the body is getting something that doesn't belong, that's interfering with biochemistry. So to be clear, and do I do that long distance? Yes, I do. Okay. Have I heard of Osgood Schlatter? Yeah, absolutely. I actually just overcame it. I had a bad case of it. The interesting story, I won't bore you too much with it, but long story short, I was doing weighted lunge box step-ups, and I took too much weight, and it shifted my knee, and it took me a little bit for recovery. But one of the best things you can do for recovery of Osgood Schlatters is myofascial release. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, it's actually getting into the knee, getting into the fibers and the tissue around the knee, the soft tissue, having a professional get in there with thumbs and tools to really dig out the adhesion and kind of work the range of motion to get that knee tracking properly again is very, very important. And the quicker you get somebody to do that, the faster you're going to make a recovery. Yeah, so those of you who are asking, I'm not going to answer medication questions over the air. So, you know, that's just not something that we're going to engage in. So I just don't want any of those types of questions coming in. Nancy says, what's in your bread? Is it vegan? Yes, it's vegan. 100% vegan. You can use it. Now, some of our recipes require egg, but you can substitute egg for things like flax or chia gel. Let's see here. So, Sudi, you've not read No Grain, No Pain. But do I suggest no brown rice as well? I suggest no brown rice as well, Sudi. That's absolutely right. Marianne says, I have to have B12 injections. What kind of injections should I avoid? Look, if you're getting B12 injections, one of the things you should know is that oral lozenges can be just as effective. Many people don't realize that, but intramuscular injections, you're injecting B12 into the muscle. You can take an oral lozenge that absorbs through the cheeks and goes directly into the bloodstream. The one I recommend is called methylcobalamin. As a matter of fact, it's to my knowledge, it's the only one that's corn-free. Pretty much all forms of lozenge-based methylcobalamin have either corn sweeteners or corn flavoring agents in them. I had to go to great lengths to make it happen in a high-dose methylcobalamin where that wasn't the case. But if you're looking at what's in your injection, a lot of people, you want to look for things like fillers that are like potassium sorbate or chemicals that are preservatives. And you also want to make sure that it's not a cyanocobalamin. C-Y-A-N-O cobalamin is not very effective with an injection, and so you can actually get methylcobalamin injections without the fillers as well. So, you know, you just got to talk to the doctor who's prescribing that to you. Okay, let's see here. Oh, I like this question. Elias is asking, which vitamins do I recommend for somebody with diagnosis of Marsh 3B? I'm going to assume you mean celiac disease, not celiac disease, just because you're using the Marsh criteria or classification on the biopsy. So if you've got a diagnosis of celiac disease, what kind of supplements do I recommend? Hands down, first and foremost, you've got to get a solid multi in you. So Ultra Nutrients is the multivitamin I recommend if you are celiac and have a history, long-term gluten exposure, and gastrointestinal atrophy where you're going to have some malabsorption. But more importantly, once you get on Ultra Nutrients, and the quantity that you take is 2 pills twice a day, just in case you're wondering, that's usually the next question. But you want to have your doctor run a full nutritional panel on you, meaning measuring iron and vitamin D and all the B vitamins and calcium and magnesium and zinc and chromium and copper and selenium, etc. Because why? because it's very, very common for people long-term celiac damage to the intestine to have more than just a few deficiencies, and sometimes a multivitamin is not enough. But without having your doctor run those tests, it's really hard to say you need X, Y, or Z. I can tell you the top 3 nutritional deficiencies I see in people with a diagnosis of celiac disease. Number 1, hands down, is iron deficiency. Number 2 is vitamin B12, and number 3 is zinc. Those are the top 3 that I personally see after about 20 years of seeing people come in and out and actually running the right types of tests to identify nutritional deficiencies. So really, you can use Ultra Nutrients as kind of a catch-all, really high-quality gluten-free multivitamin, but you want to make sure you ask your doctor to test you so that you can get a little bit more detailed information about what else you can do. Let's see here. Is there a, and Antoinette is asking, is there a rice without carbs and not considered a grain? No, not unless we're talking about wild rice, which technically is not a rice at all. There is no such thing as a rice that is not a grain, except for wild rice. Unless there's a different culture somewhere around the world that they're calling something rice that's technically not rice. Remember, rice is a seed of grass, and that's classified as a grain. Deborah says, I had C. diff and my doctor said to take Florastor. Is this okay? You know, it's one of those types of questions where we've got a supplemental product that I don't know what the ingredients are, Deborah, and I don't know what you're specifically allergic to or not allergic to. So without having that information, it's hard to tell you that yes, it is okay. Now, it could very possibly be just fine. Florastor is a probiotic, is at least to my knowledge. And so, you know, generally speaking, probiotics aren't going to hurt a person, although there are exceptions to that rule. But I would say, if you know, look at the ingredients. There's some probiotics out there. Again, if you're trying to be grain-free, if you're trying to follow no grain, no pain, right? And you want a probiotic that you know has not got corn derivative, has not got rice or other types of grain in it, then Vital Defense is the probiotic that I recommend, because I know how it's processed, I know how it's manufactured and produced. Those of you who follow me on Instagram, I posted a picture the other day. I was actually touring the facility where we make and manufacture a lot of our products, because periodically I like to go out and do quality control checks and just make sure that, you know, that my manufacturers are staying honest with me, etc. Not that I would think that they weren't being honest with me, because we vetted them long before we started using them. But you know, in the supplement industry, there are just a lot of different products with a lot of different types of fillers, and so sometimes I get a healthy product, for example, and somebody's allergic to one of the fillers. So somebody mentioned earlier they were taking a particular probiotic, and that particular probiotic, I'm familiar with it. It has potato maltodextrin in it, and if you're allergic to potato, you're not doing well with nightshades, and you're trying to follow no grain, no pain, it's the wrong probiotic for you to use. So again, a lot of it's dependent on your own uniqueness. So Elias is asking, he says, yeah, I guess he or she says, Dr. Osborne, my son been on a gluten-free diet for 3 months. His doctor just did another TTG, which is a tissue transglutaminase test. His results came the same as before. Look, he's getting cross-contamination, meaning he's eating gluten-free, but he's getting exposure from other areas. Or 2, he's following a traditional gluten-free diet. Traditional gluten-free diets only resolve the blood work on celiac patients in about 8% of people. And this has actually been studied and verified. It's one of the reasons why I founded Gluten-Free Society. So go pick up your son a copy of No Grain, No Pain and start applying those rules, and not the wheat, barley, and rye aversion rules. If you're just following a wheat, barley, and rye aversion diet, which is in the United States classically considered a gluten-free diet or a traditional gluten-free diet, you know, it's not really going to be all that effective at overcoming villus atrophy. Let's see here. Thoughts on prolonged fasting. Wolf wants to know thoughts on prolonged fasting. Good question. Actually, you know, there's a whole event around fasting coming up in January. If you're on my email subscriber list, you can. If you're not on it, you can go to glutenfreesociety.org and just sign up for the world's #1 newsletter on gluten sensitivity and health. And and I actually send reminders to people on this event. It's a fasting summit that's being put on. There are about 35 world leading experts that are going to be talking about all different varieties and ways to fast, including prolonged fasting. There are different strategies for fasting, anyway, ranging from intermittent fasting to 24-hour to 3-day to 5-day to 7-day, etc. I would just simply say that prolonged fasting is defined, in different ways by different people. But if we're talking about a 5-day plus fast, you really probably want to have somebody kind of monitoring you and watching you and making sure you don't dehydrate, making sure you don't reintroduce food too fast. There's some tricks involved with that. Juan wants to know, is glyphosate toxicity completely reversible? Yes. Let me ask you a question with a question, or answer your question with a question. If you get a cut on your skin, does it heal? And the answer should be yes, it should heal, right? And the same thing, glyphosate is a chemical cut. It's just eating something that gives you a chemical cut. And we can heal from chemical cuts, but we can't heal from them if every time they try to start healing, we cut ourselves again. So glyphosate toxicity can be healed, but the reality is that in order to heal it, you've got to quit exposing yourself to it on a regular basis. And the only way you can do that is really make sure that you're not buying processed packaged foods that have the potential to contain glyphosate. Hina says, I get severe muscle soreness after exercising. Is that due to gluten sensitivity as well? Possibly. Lots of reasons. I mean, there's delayed onset muscle soreness, which if you're new at exercising, just getting started, some people would consider that severe. We'd have to dissect that question a little bit more to get more specific about it. And Antoinette wants to know, what can we do for brain inflammation? Can we put up that link? I've got an entire blog post with an hour-long show on brain inflammation, which is what I call it, brain inflammation. And we can post that link up for you, and you can go learn a lot more about that. And those of you who don't know, if there's a topic or question, you can always come over to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain Archive on our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the bell on the video down here or over here, one of those corners, and subscribe to our feed, and you can tune into our archive shows. Andrea D wants to know, would I say the same thing about Agent Orange? I'm assuming, Andrea, you mean in reference to glyphosate. Can a person heal from Agent Orange toxicity? Yes, in my experience, yes. I've actually seen people with Agent Orange poisoning that got better. So the answer to that question, at least in my experience, although it is a limited experience, is still yes. I have seen people get better, with having that exposure. So the key to getting better, though, is not just removing the toxic load. You've got to really optimize this, and you've got to optimize this part. So the input coming here. This is why we're having this conversation tonight, because so many of you are going to go on again that detox protocol or that weight loss protocol, and if you're following somebody's online blog or something like that, and they're not addressing all these other things, look, then it's a passive protocol, and the long-term effectiveness is going to be minimalistic and not very effective. Oh man, Kayleen says the New Zealand health system told their mom that leukemia is not treatable or curable, and she has 3 years to live. My thoughts? Find another healthcare system. Any doctor who can predict the future, or any healthcare system that can claim to predict the future, get them out. Get rid of them. No doctor can predict the future, and no one can doom you to a fate. There's medical miracles all the time, first and foremost, but then secondly, leukemia, nutritionally, there are a lot of things that can support a road to recovery from the leukemia. You need to find somebody there on the ground locally who can really help you. So Denise says, just found out stone caused by an oxalate. Now have to add another diet to my already diets for gluten intolerant, sensitive, and fructose malabsorption. The thing is, Denise, without knowing if your stone was oxalate, probably calcium oxalate, it may not be that you need to go oxalate free. A lot of people develop calcium oxalate stones because their vitamin D levels are low. So the first thing that I would tell you is before you go on a low oxalate diet combined with every other restrictive diet, is really ask your doctor to measure your vitamin D levels, and ask your doctor to measure your parathyroid hormone levels, and look at those things and see if there's not a problem with the regulation of how you absorb calcium, because sometimes that it's the calcium, not the oxalate. The oxalate just binds the calcium, and it's not the oxalate causing the stone, but it's the bones are spitting calcium out. They're losing their calcium because of a vitamin D deficiency, and in some cases even like a vitamin K deficiency. So, ask your doctor to test your D, your K, your nutritional levels, and see if that doesn't have an impact before just going on a restricted diet. Yeah, I love this. Marianne Boucher says, I have chronic lymphocytic leukemia and diet change has been key. And that's true. I mean, there are cases of leukemia that have been completely reversed by diet change, going back to the question from the New Zealander. I don't know what you mean about candida and fermented foods, Elizabeth. You're going to have to ask me that question a little bit more specifically. I can talk about candida overgrowth. But tonight, what time are we? Yeah, we're already past. I've got another appointment I've got to hit, but if you go into our archives, we have a whole archive on a lot of these topics, and one of them is candida. And I did a very, very long show on candida, including strategies to avoid it, strategies to overcome it. So I don't know if we can put that link up in the feed, and maybe if Alan can find it for you, he can throw that up, because several of you have asked that question tonight, and at least we can get you a temporary answer until next week. Okay, I will see you guys again soon. I don't know if I'll be here next week or not, so if I don't see you next week, it'll be a Merry Christmas for me, and hopefully a Merry Christmas for you all. But we will be back, if not next week, the following Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Again, remember, if you don't have your copy of No Grain, No Pain, go pick it up. If you are trying to help a friend out or trying to give the gift of health, buy a copy and give away a copy. And make sure, too, you're sharing this information. Our goal is 100 million people. That's a lofty goal. We reach about 2 million people a year through Gluten-Free Society's mission. And I need your help. I need your help to help me reach more people. So make sure you're sharing. Make sure you're subscribing. And we will see you next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Merry Christmas. Have a great evening.